Howdy and welcome to Rauta's Opinion Videos. Today I was having a little bit of a discussion with one of the artists of whose album I got for review and got me started the kind of old conversation with so many bands that I've gone through throughout the years. And the talk was about review scores. What does it even mean when you get a certain score? And how some artists rather go for a low score and say like, I'd rather pick that 3 out of 10 or 2 out of 10 than this just kind of a neutral and boring 5 or 6 out of 10. And then became the conversation which kind of started to put my brain into this review mindset, if you will. And that is how review scores are given. Obviously, I can only talk on behalf of myself and not so much about other review people, because obviously everybody gives those scores or ratings in a different ways, and there is no kind of a set of rules how to give any kind of a certain score or rating or whatever you want to call it. Now obviously these ratings also are different from publication to publication. Certain magazines, for example, or websites, or heck, even these kind of YouTube reviewers, each of them give these ratings in a little bit a different way. Some don't do review scores at all, like I don't do it here, even though I'm a big fan of numbers. I mean, I like to think about things in numbers. It doesn't matter if it's a person of interest, like say there's this model woman. I'm like, wow, that's a 9er. And sometimes I could, watch a movie and think, maybe this is just 7. I mean, it's pretty good, but not that great. So it's kind of weird that I don't have these scores here. And one of the reasons is I want to do it differently here on Rauta, because I've been rating so many albums throughout the years for other media, and I like to take a different path here. Yet still, whenever I am doing a review here or other places, I always go by the numbers. That is, those review scores, ratings. And obviously I ponder that stuff a lot, because I mean, been doing these for like almost 20 years. And obviously whenever you go through a huge number of albums, or whatever release format is, EPs, singles, compilations, whatever, you just start, pondering like, how good this is, how does this compare to others? And even more so it becomes important when I'm going through a whole discography of a band. Like I've done a few of these whole discography videos, which later on I started to do as worst to best listings. And obviously when you want to put these certain albums in certain order, like you're figuring out, hey, which Morbid Angel album is better than the others, or which Dark Throne one is the best. Obviously you want to be clear about it in your head, that you want to put them in a certain order. And usually you need more than just a gut feeling to put them into this perfect order. But what does it even mean? I mean, like when you have score rating from, say, 0 to 10 or 1 to 10, or maybe you have percentage system, like from 1% to 100. Maybe you have rating like stars, like total ratings, like 1 star to 5 stars. It doesn't really matter what kind of a scale you're using. What you're bound to use, or you should be bound to use, as an individual of no reviews done, or as a review person, you obviously should go all the way through from the very lowest score to the highest of the score. And you shouldn't be giving, too high scores too easily, or they kind of lose their point. And that's where most review people get some kind of a feedback every now and then. That is, if they get any feedback at all. I'm not saying that everybody gets feedback. Obviously on YouTube you get a lot more feedback, both good and bad, than otherwise. Like let's put it this way. During a week of Rauta, I get more feedback about my reviews than I might get in 10 years about my written reviews. So it's kind of different format, but I mean, whenever I do a certain kind of a big band review, or maybe there's even some smaller band which clearly divides people into fans or haters or whatever, you really get some kind of a feedback. Like, if it goes negative way, it's something like, you just don't understand this band at all. Why don't you just quit being this review dude? Because you clearly have no pair of ears, no brain, no adding at all. Maybe just kill yourself and all that stuff. Yeah, it's fair opinion, I guess. It's kind of a stupid way to say it, but I get the point. And sometimes people are like, and this is more often luckily, positive ways, like, man, I totally agree with you. You totally nail it. I mean, like, I love your reviews because you kind of described the stuff here, and I like the score you're given because, you pretty much described how I feel about this album. Now, I don't want to be about this bubble, or what we call it, circle jerk, because, I mean, it's cool that people disagree on things. I'm not expecting people to have the same opinion about any given band or release that I'm having. But, yeah, I mean, people should be civil about it. But back to the scores. This is not about so much ranting about how people give feedback. Now, the thing here is, when I was saying that you should be using the entire scale of review scores, like here being the 1 and here being the 10, or 1 and 100, doesn't really matter. I'm a person who prefers 1 to 10, much like IMDb, that is Internet Movie Database, uses 1 star to 10 stars, or basically it's just 1 to 10 score. But some, scenes use like weird scales like 1 to 7, 1 to 6, and it's really hard to scale to 100%, which is in fact what sites like Metascore does, They scale everything, even if it's an American school rating like A, B+, or whatever, they scale it to 100. That is percentage scale. And that is very simple to understand. Even if you go from 1 to 5, you can pretty much just count it by 20 and you get the score. Like if there is a 3 out of 5 star an album, yeah, it's kind of in the middle, it's some 60%. So basically a little bit better than the average score, which is supposedly some 50 or 55%, depending if you start from 0 or 1 or 1 star to 100. Anyway, my point here is you should be able to use the full scale, or otherwise you're doing something wrong. And here is my confession. I think I have never given 1 out of 10. So I'm kind of failing with what I'm here suggesting, because I think I have been saving that 1 star rating for some kind of a release that never seems to come. Luckily so, but still I'm doing wrong here. However, I have given some 1.5 and also some 2 out of 10s. So it's not like I'm too far from the scale, but I'm not really successful using the full scale. Obviously, I have given some 10 out of 10 reviews, but I mean, there are not too many of them, and I'm kind of happy about it. I'm happy about it that I have few 10 out of 10s, because what is more pathetic than not using the full scale in the low end is that you never give a full score. And some people say it's because there is no perfect album, there is no perfect movie, there is no perfect game, no perfect book, no perfect theater play. Yeah, we get it. Nothing is perfect. That is, no human does a perfect thing. And in my opinion, the perfect thing would be something like off the scale, like 11 out of 10, or like at least here in Finland we have this kind of a meme like it's 6 out of 5. But you're really, I mean, if you are a person of science, or if you're certain kind of a autistic, well, what I seem to be every now and then, is that here you have a glass, which is, by the way, quite dirty, even though I have been drinking just water lately, maybe some beer in there. Anyway, I'm gonna use it. If you pour this glass full, it's 100% full, you get it. If you pour too much, it will just come out. That's what you have if you do 6 out of 5s, and or anything other than 100%. Like there's the saying, like you have to give 110%. Seriously, people, you really can't do that. That's why you have these scales. 1 to 10, 1 to 100. There is no 110% album. But if there was a perfect album, that would be it would be more than fill your glass, because, well, it's impossible. That's the kind of a paradox here we're talking about. So people who are not giving these full scores, I think they have a flaw with their scale, and they should be just adjusting the scale so that there would be some 10s. I mean, if you go as far as to say it's the best thing I've experienced, I give it a 9er, and you're like, best, and you give it only a 9. Like, what's wrong with you, person? Anyway, my point here is different medias, different people, maybe even different days have different ratings. For example, so many years, and this came to my mind when I was doing the Doctor on Worst to Best, came to my mind that I have always felt like Under a Funeral Moon is the best Doctor album. It's the only 10 out of 10 album, and the rest, while they're really good, they're not that great. Now, I was obviously a little bit wrong, because when I was listening to that, I figured out all right, I've been wrong throughout the years. It's actually Transylvanian Hunger that is the best album for me. And I kind of didn't have to realize until that. It's much like sometimes you don't even realize you have these strong emotions for some other person until it's too late or whatever. And you're like, how did I never realize I was so much in falling in love with this whatever person or album or whatever. And I started to think that maybe I did wrong all the way, but it doesn't mean that Under a Funeral Moon it wouldn't be a 10 out of 10 album, but more like there's two Dark Throne albums. So there is this thing that sometimes you think other ways and maybe it might change throughout the years. Sometimes I have thought that some album is 8 out of 10, and when you listen it after many years of a pause, and you're like, it isn't that good anyway. What I had in my mind when I was picking one of those 2B classic review albums a few years ago, and I was sure that it would be something like 8, maybe 8.5 out of 10, and I felt like it's less than 8. So I decided not to review it for a classic review because it seems like my mind had changed about the opinion. It seems more like the album starts so great but never finishes that well. And it's, by the way, a album by German black metal band Nagelfar. Also, it seems like when I was going through this Dark Throne discography, I felt like some albums were better than what they actually were. So when I was doing that's my rating, focusing on which Dark Throne albums to put in which order, and I was like sorting up, making notes, whatever I was doing, like doing stuff at the yard, outside, driving a car. I was making mental notes, then tapping on my phone, like is this album better than that one? How do I decide if these both are 9ers or 8 ones, 8 out of 10s? But that's what you do when you go by the numbers. And sometimes when you're doing reviews, it gets easier because you don't really have to compare, like, is this Burzum album better than the other one here? But you're more like, okay, this is a clear 6. It's better than mediocre, but not much. It's definitely not decent one. It's just quite okay. And you're trying to figure out how to support your words backed up by this number, or vice versa. Maybe you first decide a number and then you back up with my words. It doesn't really matter. What matters is that whatever you say about it, whatever you write about it, you should be having these numbers and words go hand in hand. They should be supporting each other. So in case you're talking about some mediocre album, obviously you don't give it an 8 out of 10. You don't say like, yeah, it's okay. I mean, it is decent production. The vocals are somewhat okay. I'm not really too much fancying this album, but it's a 9. Like, you don't do that. Obviously, if you go and mock some album too bad, you should be giving it a score that really supports that stuff. But you don't do that just because you hate the album title, or because you feel like there's a goofy cover art, or because you know that the vocalist in the band is sort of a douchebag. You're supposed to go with the music. Whatever might affect your mindset. I mean, if you had a kind of a fight with your significant other, or maybe you had a shitty day at work, you still shouldn't be reflecting that on the music you're listening to. So if you go like, hey, I'm gonna review this baby, don't give a 9 just because you made love to your beautiful wife. I mean, more like, hey, as much sweet time I had with my loved one, this is not that good. But this album is actually good, even though I didn't have anything going on. My point here is people should be kind of evaluating their own mindset when reflecting them on that review and that music, and shouldn't take offense either when review people are in a disagreement, because I mean there's no harm if you disagree with an opinion about an album or a book or whatever. I mean, if like, hey, this good guy couldn't figure out it's a 9 out of 10 for me, he gave it only 7. Like, so what? Who cares? I mean, it's your opinion. Does that matter more than the other one? But also, I think it's cool when a disagreement kind of stirs up some conversation, a discussion about like, so why did you think that this album is 6 out of 10? Because for me it's an 8. Like, what's going on? Why didn't you feel the emotion, the good production, the the passion with the vocals, what's going on, instead of like, you don't understand music because you clearly don't give the same review score than I do. Like, people take that stuff way too personally. Sometimes I find it really funny, and now I'm off tracking, I know, that it's so funny that bands are like, okay, this album is pretty cool. And the review guy liked it. I mean, it's nice. And then some fan comes up and they're like, hey, the review guy, he didn't respect that album too much. We should hang him by the balls. It's so funny. But the point here is, be critical about it. Whatever you listen to, whatever you read, play, doesn't matter. I mean, always reflect on that. Like, being honest. That's the most important thing about review scores. And we are all prone to that. Sometimes some album takes us by the, I don't know by what exactly, by the balls maybe. And we're just so much fall in love with the band, even though we're praising it way beyond that what it's actually worth for. And it's okay. I mean, it's supposed to be about feelings and emotions. These are not things that you measure like in a scientific method. You don't take this measuring tape and like, yes, this album is 14 centimeters long, so I'll give it an 8. It's not like that. Or how you put it in a scale and say, yeah, it weighs some 90 grams. It's supposed to be really good because it weighs so much. I mean, vinyls would win always, right? Well, long rant about nothing, I guess. I'm just trying to point out that really when you're in a band and you wish for, I wish we could get that 3 out of 10, because at least then somebody would read the review and rather not skip it like they do with those 6 out of 5s. And then when you finally read that 3 out of 10 or 2 out of 10 review and you feel like this review person just hates your guts because you made such a shitty album, you kind of start hoping for that you actually got even that 5 out of 10. It's not so easy every now and then, because really those really bad albums are so rare things to have that when you finally get to listen and more like waste your time with a crappy album such as that, the review person is probably wanting to spill his or her guts out about how horrible that album really is, because it's more likely that the review person will get that 8 out of 10 albums way more often than these 2 out of 10 ones. Because really horrible albums are not that common in place. I mean, we know the negative mindset nowadays people have, say like, hey, this album is full of crap, or I didn't even bother listening to it, it's so goddamn horrible. Whereas I am more like, yeah, maybe it's a radio quality song, maybe it's some 5 out of 10, but at least your ears don't bleed when you're doing that. You just survive and move on. But with the horrible ones, you just feel like maybe I should stop listening to new music and focus on the old stuff, because at least it doesn't really disappoint you. Now, long rant, probably, and I hope that you had some coffee or beer or whatever to go with this. Now it's too late to grab that. With all this being said, be reasonable with your scores. Try to understand why a review person does his or her stuff, and don't get offended if somebody disagrees with you. Just take it as an opportunity to have a proper civil discussion. That's all I'm saying. Now, long opinion video out. Go and enjoy your weekend and listen to some good shit.